This episode of Tales from the Backlog is brought to you by the wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/realdavejackson. Some personal heroes of mine like Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast Crew, Zulgeek, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Ficori, Jill, Soccer, ZNA, Cupcake, Kyle, Kristen S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Rob Shack, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jake Martin, Jenny E., and many more have all chosen to show their support for Tales from the Backlog, people named Dave, and podcasters around the world by going to patreon.com/realdavejackson to kick a few bucks a month my way and support the show. In return for their donations, these people are getting some cool benefits like being able to vote in polls, and a new benefit that was just announced where at the tube producer level you can nominate games to go in the polls. If that sounds cool to you, you can head over to patreon.com/realdavejackson, check out the tiers, and if you want to support that way, it would be greatly appreciated. With that being said, let's get on to the show. Hello everybody, my name is Dave Jackson and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show returning for the second time, a professional voice actor, Twitch streamer, and much, much more, and swoop racing champion 20 years running, Mick Davis, aka Mick Arcade. Welcome back, Mick.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be back, and I gotta tell you, running the swoop races on Terrace has been the greatest joy of my entire life.
It's good to have you back on the show today. We're going to talk about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is an RPG developed by BioWare and published by LucasArts for Windows and Xbox in 2003. For people who are listening and have not played Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, henceforth probably known as KOTOR, because I'm not going to say all those words the entire time. If you haven't played KOTOR, you do not need to worry. We're not going to spoil the story for you. This game has a very interesting and quite famous story around Star Wars and video game land, so we're not going to spoil it for you. You can check down in the show notes for a timestamp for when the spoilers begin, so you can jump out at that point if you want to avoid being spoiled there. So, getting into what this game is, we've prepared some elevator pitches for the top of the show. I say you can live out your Jedi fantasy in this approachable Star Wars RPG with one of the more memorable stories in all of Star Wars media. Mick, what would you say?
Hey kids, you like Star Wars? Well, I got some real good Star Wars for you right here. Mm-hmm. Come on in.
It is real good Star Wars. I played this the first time I played this on Xbox. I don't like Xbox 360, I guess, back in 2007 or so. This time around, I replayed it on Switch. The Switch port works mostly fine. It crashed a couple of times, but you'll have that with a lot of Switch ports these days. 35 hours for me to beat, and that includes doing a good number of side quests. How about you, Mick? Where have you played this? How long would you say a playthrough takes you?
So I played it originally on the Xbox, on the first Xbox, and I think my play times were in that 37 to like 45 kind of area. Mm-hmm. It just depends on really how much I would go onto side quests and things like that, because obviously, depending on what you do when you go to the different planets, you can do a lot of side content, or you can just bore through and go through the mainline content. So I first played it on Xbox, but then I've also played it on Switch, which, as you said, it sort of works.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Works well enough. I beat the game, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so back in the day, you played it on the original Xbox. What was it that made you want to play it? Was it the fact that it's BioWare? Was it Star Wars fandom? What was it?
Oh, it was 1,000% Star Wars fandom.
Okay.
I had no idea who BioWare was when I played this game the first time, because I played it essentially when it came out. A buddy of mine at the time, he's a couple years older than me, and he had an apartment, and across the street from the apartment was, because this was a very small town that he was living in, but across the street they had a local video store. So, you know, I'd go like hang out with him on the weekends and stuff, and like during the summer, and went over, and we were over at the video store just kind of goofing around looking at different stuff, saw this game and said, hey, let's try this Star Wars game out, man. And we were hooked. Played it just like all night, like one of those, like just stayed up all night playing it because we were just blown away by how different it was and how cool it was. Because again, in 2003, like you didn't really get a lot of games that were doing this, much less Star Wars games. I think at that point, kind of the bar set for Star Wars was Shadows of the Empire on 64.
Right.
So yeah, we just loved it and had a blast with it. And eventually when I got an Xbox myself, it was one of the first games that I got, and just absolutely loved it. It and the sequel, which is a whole nother story. Yep.
Maybe a future episode on the show if I get around to playing it, because I have them both on Switch now. So, yeah, for me personally, this was also for me because I grew up as a giant Star Wars fan, and kind of only recently in the last handful of years kind of fell off of Star Wars as a thing that I make my whole personality, shaped around and stuff.
I still have it. My entire personality is shaped around Star Wars.
Hell yeah. So back then, I was not really someone who played this kind of game. But I was, like you said, I was looking for like cool Star Wars games. And back in 2007, the closest thing that I remember was like I liked Rogue Squadron on the N64, and there were the Star Wars games on like the Super Nintendo that were so difficult that I didn't think they were very fun.
Dark Souls level difficulty on those games.
I put that even higher. Those games are like fuck you difficult, I think.
Yeah, they are brutal. God, I mean, it's one of those games, you have like games that you've probably rented multiple times in your life. That is one of those games. Or Super Empire Strikes Back. Rented it so many times. I don't think we ever legitimately got far into the game. We had to use like cheat codes and stuff from Nintendo Power because it was just so brutal.
Yeah, and that was kind of my experience with Shadows of the Empire too. Like I played that game a lot. I don't think I ever beat the second level of that game. So, or maybe I got a little bit further because I remember doing a Hoth level and stuff like
there's
that.
There's the initial one where you're doing the snow speeder and then you actually run around in the base.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever got past that. Or there's like an early game train level I remember that. So
that one
not
is
far.
Ford Mantell. It's so insanely hard.
Yeah,
and then the Boba Fett boss fight is brutal.
So I don't even think I made it to Boba Fett. I don't.
He's so ridiculously hard.
So not a lot of like. There wasn't a video game that I could like sink my teeth into the way that I really wanted to with Star Wars back then. So in 2007, I played KOTOR for the first time. And it's weird because in 2003, I had an Xbox and I loved Star Wars, and I just never heard about this game because I think we were probably just playing Halo at the time.
I think you're right. That seemed to happen with a lot of Xbox games. From my memory of it was Halo just dominated it so much that things like, at least from, again, my perspective, like Morrowind kind of fell through the cracks for a lot of people. KOTOR did, Fable did, like it just, there's so many games that seem to fall through the cracks. At least like people found them eventually, but like, Halo was just ruling the system.
Yeah, and then that's the other part of it. After I kind of got tired of Halo, I found Morrowind, and that was like the next 2 years of my life. I just played Morrowind. So 2007, I finally got around to playing KOTOR, and I remember it's 2007 in particular because I had a very specific lifestyle in the summer of 2007. I was in college. It was the summertime. I was taking one class. I didn't have a job. And so I would go to my one class, I would come home and play KOTOR all afternoon. Then my roommate would get home. We would make Hamburger Helper. We'd eat it 3 to 4 times a week. And we watched Lost all evening together. And so that was the summer. KOTOR in the afternoons, Lost in the evening, class in the morning. And I did that with 3 seasons of Lost and both KOTOR games. And it was a beautiful summer.
That's what I would say.
To go back to that kind of life.
That's like picturesque. It's that one of those, like, you sit back and look and go, it will never get better than this.
Yeah. And I don't think I've had Hamburger Helper since, although I'm not against it.
Nothing wrong with it. No, it's like I said, I had a very similar experience with, going to a buddy's house and playing it. And then when I got it myself, it was just sitting back and just playing it for hours and hours and hours. And like, what happens if I go here? What happens if I go there? Because it is a game of choice. And I think at that point, I hadn't played many games that were games of choice outside of, like, Resident Evil 2, maybe, where do I take the machine gun or do I leave it? Do I take the backpack or do I leave? Like, that was kind of the extent of choice in games. But this was just like, everything you did matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they sold us. And I think the other game like that was Fable, where your choices mattered in that your character would become like an angel or like a literal devil with horns on their head and stuff. But other than that, it was, I like that game. But anyway, KOTOR. So how do you think, like, to give some quick opening thoughts here, how do you think KOTOR holds up here in 2023?
I think it's one of those weird things where I feel like it holds up pretty well because the way the story is told is good. Like, it's a good story. It's a solid story. Mm-hmm. The gameplay, at least the first one, and the first Mass Effect is the same way. I feel like the gameplay is a little clunky, but it's something that BioWare did all the way until Mass Effect 2, I want to say, was a drastic shift in how they approached their gameplay, because, like, Dragon Age was like that, Jade Empire was like that, Mass Effect was like that. So I do think the combat could potentially be a touch off-putting for some people because it's kind of slow. It's not very action-driven in terms of, like, you press a button, you swing the lightsaber. It's you press a button, and then you kind of wait, and then the lightsaber might hit. So it's very D&D style in that regard. But I think it's good enough combat, and the story and the characters are good enough that can draw you in, and it makes up for it. Again, and this was even in 2003. I kind of felt like this because, you're playing something like, episode 3 on PlayStation 2. That's a completely different experience because it is like a more action-based gameplay, but the story is the main focus of this game and the characters.
Yeah, so I think that, like, playing it in 2023, I largely agree with you. I think the story holds up, and, like, I don't want to really get into the story a whole lot in any real detail right now, but I was curious about how this story in particular would hold up when you already know what's coming, like how things are laid out. Is it a well-constructed story? And I came out of this replay thinking, yes, it actually is. It's really pretty damn good. And the story content that I'm getting from contemporary Star Wars stuff, the prequel trilogy was just a trash fire of storytelling, in my opinion.
Partially written by children, because George Lucas asked his children, "Hey, what would you like to see?"
Fun.
Yeah.
And Andor was fun. And what's the new Jedi games? I played Fallen Order. I thought that was pretty fun too. Yeah. I haven't gotten around to Jedi Survivor yet, but it's on the list. This still holds up as a very good Star Wars story. I agree with you. The gameplay is very, it's strange. It feels like I had a really interesting experience here. I played this directly between Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
Oh, wow. So you're kind of in the mode of, like, those style of games, because it is very much in that sort of same style of those games.
But, like, that's this year I played that, like, not back then. So this year
like
I played
now.
I played Baldur's Gate 1 for the podcast. I played this for a guest appearance on our Retro Hangover, and then I played Baldur's Gate 2 again for my podcast here. all BioWare and all right in this like evolutionary line that connects Baldur's Gate to Mass Effect. So that's really what I came out of this feeling like, is like they made a very conscious effort to make this game approachable for people who don't know everything about D&D, and also make it good for a console. And I think that really shows, because the gameplay is so simple that it is completely unmemorable. And honestly, like by about halfway through the game, you don't really have to think about what you're doing in combat a whole lot. So it's a cool thing to see that the story holds up, but the gameplay I do not think has held up very well. Just to, quick opening things at the top of the show.
Yeah, I agree. I do think you kind of touched on this. I think the further you get in, you get used to the combat, so it's not as like bad and clunky. Like it still is what it is, but you're used to like, okay, I know what I need to do. I know how everything works. I know how the force powers work and this and that. Yeah. So you can go through everything. Again, it's not engaging, but you can sort of turn your brain off because every fight seems to go the same way.
Yep. Agreed. So let us take our first music break of the episode, and when we come back, we're going to set up the story of KOTOR. So in Knights of the Old Republic, as the name The Old Republic might suggest, it is set thousands of years before the events of the Skywalker saga, which just real quick, I want to say, I love when Star Wars media is not set during the Skywalker saga. I love to see, new ideas, especially things that are not in that between episode 3 and 4 range, because they have hammered that into the ground. The well is dry. I'm using too many metaphors, but I was like, this is completely separate. New characters, new dynamics. Obviously, the Jedi and the Sith are still here, but like everything's new. The fountain is flowing for new story ideas.
No, I agree so much, because in a lot of ways, I think KOTOR gives us the sort of Star Wars that we kind of always wanted to see. Like you watch A New Hope and Obi-Wan references the Clone Wars, and he references who Anakin was and how Anakin was and things like that. So your mind goes into a certain direction of like what that looks like. Well, then we got to see what it looks like, and it wasn't quite what our level of expectation was. Mm-hmm. And throughout the 90s, there was just so much expanded universe kind of content, the Young Jedi Order and, the Young Jedi Knights books and all that kind of stuff, the Thrawn trilogy. So there was so much like cool content that was for Star Wars. But then they showed us this, and it was like, oh, this is amazing, because like you could tell a completely unique story. Mm-hmm. You could do whatever you want to do with it, and it's what everybody likes. It's like tons of Jedi, they're fighting tons of Sith, not just like literally one dude, even though it is Darth Vader and he's awesome. But they're not like old people. They're actually like younger and capable and doing cool stuff. So ship battles, like it's all the best parts of Star Wars without some of the baggage that Star Wars can carry.
Yeah. And especially that between episode 3 and 4 timeline, where so many of these stories have taken place in recent years. Like the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor storyline takes place during that time. And not to say that they can't tell a good story during that time, but there's a lid on what can happen, because we already know how everything plays out, and we know what the most powerful people in the galaxy are going to do. So they're the ones who control how the bigger story goes. So not that there's not any value in smaller stories within Star Wars, but it is cool to just get a completely fresh timeline. You can do anything you want.
I agree. And as you said, you can tell these stories, but you have to work really, really hard to make them like engaging and gripping and because if you don't, you're just like, I know these people are gonna die, or I know this guy's not around.
Like, he's not like Cal Kestis isn't gonna kill Darth Vader at the end of one of these games. It's just not gonna happen. It can't happen. So
yeah. So it's like, I appreciate you, Cal. However, I know you're ultimately gonna lose.
Yep.
I didn't see you popping up in any movies or shows, so you're gonna die.
Yeah. He's a grizzled old man in one of the bars on Tatooine in A New Hope or something like that.
That would actually be awesome if they did that. It's
It'd
sort of like
it's the guy that Luke cuts his hands off in the bar or something. They'd be like, "Oh, that was Cal." They'll retcon that or something.
Yeah. Well, it's like I think it was sort of a retcon how they've put Captain Rex in Return of the Jedi, because there's like this older dude who's like super tan and has like a bushy white beard, and now everybody's like, that's actually Captain Rex from the Clone Wars. It's like, I don't know if it really is him or not, but a lot of people are like, no, that's him, because he kind of looks like Tamara Morrison with a white beard.
Yeah. As Obi-Wan that cut the guy's hands off. Don't come at me, Star Wars people. Anyway, in KOTOR, you play as a Republic soldier. The game begins as your ship is being attacked. You and this other soldier named Karth jump into an escape pod, and you crash on the planet Taurus. On Taurus, you join up with Karth and search the planet for a Jedi named Bastila, who has escaped from the falling ship. Bastila has this power called battle meditation that is I imagine in my head as like she's playing StarCraft while battles are playing or something like that. And so she's a weapon and she cannot fall into the wrong hands. So you got to go find her in this opening section. So you're on Taurus for a while, and this is just kind of a thing I want to bring up about the pacing of this story. There's this early section in Taurus, and there's another late game section that comes when you think the game is over. You have another like 5-hour section, and these two sections I think are both too long, and they fuck up the pacing. Otherwise, in the middle section, I think the pacing is pretty good.
No, I agree 100%. I think there's a point, and I want to say when you get the Sith uniform to go into the Undercity of Taurus, and you end up with like, you go into the other area where there's like the Rakghouls and there's like the people who kind of live like, once I got to that point, I was like, am I just going to be on this planet the entire time? Because it really does. It just drags so long. And like, once you've gone through it once, you kind of know like what to do, what not to do, and stuff like that. Although there is some fun stuff, like, you know, you can be the mysterious stranger and you can do all those battles, which is fun. And but you kind of quickly learn like, oh, I don't have to do side content. I could just go do the main content.
The thing about that early section on Taurus too is that at this point, like, your character becomes a Jedi in this game. I don't think it's a big spoiler to say that.
No. I think they tell you on the back of the box, actually.
Right. So you're living out your Jedi fantasy. Like, I think I said that in the elevator pitch. But anyway, in this Taurus section, this is before you do any Jedi stuff. So you're just a dude, and you're swinging metal swords and shooting blasters and stuff like that. And in your head, you're like, I am playing this game because I want to do Jedi RPG shit. When do I get to become a Jedi? It's hour 10. I'm still in this fucking city.
Yeah. No, it's brutal. And I do think that's one of the other downsides, is because even if you do know, like, okay, I'm going to become a Jedi, so you can, you know, pick you could pick more sword-based abilities and attacks and things like that. But at the same time, depending on what your starting class was, you might be sinking a ton of points into blaster-related stuff, which, when you become a Jedi, you're never using a blaster again.
No,
I think there's actually penalties for using a blaster as a Jedi.
It's like the game is like smacking you on the hand with a ruler. Like, dude, use your lightsaber. Come on.
Yeah. And it's like, but I don't have one. I just have a shitty metal sword.
Yeah.
No, it is the one downside about any time I replay this game is like, oh, cool, I get to be here for literally ever, because that is just, it's terrible pacing. They fixed it a little bit in the second game, because at least with that, you have force powers, you just don't have a lightsaber in the very beginning. But even then, it's a little too long before you get what you want.
Right. So eventually you do find out that your character's force sensitive. You find Bastila. You go to the Jedi home planet of Dantooine, I believe is the name of the Jedi home planet. Yeah. You get an audience with the council, and they send you out on the hunt for this thing called the Star Forge, which is a weapon that can harness like the power of stars and do horrible, dark side shit from it. There's also a Sith Lord named Darth Malak and his old master named Darth Revan, who are supposedly out looking for this too. Darth Revan has disappeared after a battle, and so you're kind of following in their footsteps looking for this Starforge weapon. And that is the bulk of the early portion of the game. You go to 4 planets. You go to Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Dantooine, and Korriban, and Manan is the other one. So 5 planets in total, looking for these maps that will lead you to the Starforge location. So you get to go on like a little tour of fun places that you probably already knew from various Star Wars media, especially Tatooine and Kashyyyk with all the Wookiees.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Dantooine's a reference as well. Dantooine, they're on Dantooine.
Right, yeah.
So, like, again, it's kind of cool that it was just, like, offhandedly mentioned in a movie, and they're like, we got the whole planet for you to walk around on. So that was really nice, I think.
Yeah, and it's cool to kind of give more life to some of these locations, like, especially Kashyyyk. You heard... you met one Wookiee in the Star Wars movies, and then now you get to go to a planet full of them. You go out in the jungle.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And that, spoilers, that's one of my favorite places that you visit in the whole game is that whole section on Kashyyyk is a lot of fun. So just some kind of thoughts about the story here before we move into other sections. You are joined by several characters in your quest. There are 9 other characters that can join you. You can form a party of 3, including yourself. I think a lot of these characters have pretty interesting backstories, and this is continuing from Baldur's Gate, but like really moving into like, people sometimes talk about the side characters in Baldur's Gate. People love the side characters in Mass Effect, and this feels like another one of those ways that this game feels like an evolutionary step between the two. The characters that you meet are pretty memorable, and a lot of them have good stories.
I agree. And I think one of the really cool things is the ability to deepen your relationship with the different characters.
Yeah.
So you get more of that backstory. I mean, as you said, you first start running around with Karth, and he's basically closed off to you and is just a giant dickhead.
Yeah.
And doesn't want to tell you anything. And so you really have to spend time and raise your relationship and your bond with him to get him to start opening up to you. And some of the other characters, they're a little quicker to tell you stuff and things like that. But I do really like that you do feel that closeness and that bond, because you might just be running around for hours doing combat and things like that, but the ability to, they'll have an opinion about something that you did or said, or just something that's going on, and that leads to a whole thing of dialogue and more story, and it's really cool. And they're all very unique and very different. Like, I don't think any two of the characters are close to being the same.
Right. Like, you have a lot of representation from like the different species or races, however they classify them in Star Wars. You have a couple of droids, but the 2 droids you pick up could not be more different from one another.
My boy HK.
Yeah. HK-47 is a really memorable one. He's a real bloodthirsty droid, which is very different from, the C-3POs and R2-D2s of the world. Super memorable. I'm a big fan of Mission and Zalbar. Mission is a Twi'lek girl, and Zalbar is a Wookiee, and they come as a pair, and they are really great together.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're super fun. I really like Canderous. He's one of my favorite guys to use, just because it's so weird. In a game that has like characters that are on the extreme ends of a spectrum, like HK is obviously like the baddest of the bad characters that you can get.
Yeah.
But he's a droid, so he does what you say. And you know, like Mission and Karth and Zalbar, they're like the goody two shoes. Canderous is like the real character because, you know, he's like, yeah, sometimes you have to do bad things. That's a thing that you do. And it happens. Like, so I just appreciate his depth of character.
Yeah.
And he's a Mandalorian. So
Right.
you get that cool Mandalorian lore that by this point we just had next to nothing on. So
Yeah.
it was really cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So like it's one of those things you get to learn about Mandalorian culture through talking with Canderous. You get to learn about Wookiees by doing stuff with Zalbar and going to Kashyyyk, and you get to learn about all of these different types of characters. This also kind of introduced, I think, the idea of like whenever you go into your ship, you go around the ship and you can talk to all of your side characters, hear what they think about what just happened, do character like side quests for them. All of them have different side quests that will kind of deepen your relationship with them, give you some rewards and stuff. Which again, it's something that like they did here, and then they really explored and expanded this in the Mass Effect trilogy.
Yeah, they did it heavily in Mass Effect. They did it heavily in Dragon Age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just sort of the BioWare way now. Is I want to say they've pretty much got it to a science at this point where it's good.
Yeah. One other thing I think I want to point out about this story, and like there's a couple reasons why I think this story is really interesting, especially compared to other Star Wars stories we get. This game is full of Jedi and it's full of Sith. And I think that this game in particular, more so than most of the movies and other games and stories I've experienced, does a cool job of exploring like what is it actually like to be a Jedi and all of the pressures you'll face, because you meet more Jedi in here than you do in the original trilogy of Star Wars. And then when this game came out, the prequel trilogy was still coming out, basically. So you meet more Jedi and you meet people who fall into the dark side, and you see how easily it can happen. You experience that with Anakin in the prequels, but you already knew that was going to happen. With some of the characters in KOTOR, you get to see like, this character's like master was a dick to them during training, and it just sent them on this spiral to the dark side really easily. There's other Jedi who like forsake the ways of the Jedi because they're like, hey, this shit sucks. I want to be a regular person. So I think that this is really cool how this game spends a lot of time examining all of that stuff. Like in the movies that we grew up with, you know, the Luke Skywalker story, the Jedi are portrayed as perfect, basically.
Yeah,
for a long time, until it wasn't until like the prequel trilogy when it's like, oh, the Jedi made like horrible mistakes and they fucked this whole thing up. But for a long time, the Jedi are presented in this like just they are like the white knights of the galaxy. They never make mistakes. They're incredible. And this game is like, hey, being a Jedi would actually kind of suck.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that's one of the really interesting things. And it's something that we got to see explored more in the Clone Wars animated, because we got to see more Jedis in a time of war, because that's where this game is taking place. There's a war between the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah.
So they're not just the benevolent protectors that are just kicking back being like, life's pretty good. You know, no, you get to actually see the pressures and the struggles and the things that they have to deal with. And as you said, you know, some of it's just like, man, my master was a real dickhead. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to the dark side. You get to see characters fall to the dark side. You get to see characters you can redeem one of your side characters from the dark side and they can come back from it. You know, like it's so deep. And you also get to look at it and realize how nuanced the Jedi Order is. And it's like, oh, they're not all that. Some of them are just straight up assholes and just, you know, like, no wonder you would fall to the dark side if you had to deal with this fucking guy. Like, the Sith are a little bit more one note, which is kind of disappointing. Like, you never meet a clever Sith. They're all kind of stupid and just one note.
It's kind of the way, like, when they wrote, whoever wrote it, George Lucas probably wrote how the Sith like work. There's not really a lot of room for expression within that when it's like they only care about power and their duty in life is to kill their master and then take on a Padawan that will then kill them. That's Sith life.
Yeah, which is just other people since have added more nuance to the dark side into the Sith and things like that outside of the rule of two and expanded on it. So it, you know, as like a deep fan of Star Wars lore and like the Force and how it is, it's like, yeah, the dark side is a little bit more nuanced, at least theoretically. So yeah, so that is disappointing, but they do a really good job with showing the depth and layers of the Jedi, like you said, which is very cool to see.
Yep. Speaking of Jedi and Sith, this game also has a morality system. You make lots and lots of choices about how you talk to people, how you go about solving quests, and all of those choices will give you dark side points or light side points. So if you donate money to someone to help them pay their debt, you'll get light side points. If you kill a civilian, you'll get dark side points. And so you can kind of branch in the direction you want. When you become a Jedi, you can be a Jedi, or you can turn over to the dark side and kind of role play that a little bit. I have played this game twice. I did a light side playthrough both times, and it's mostly because the dark side just doesn't seem that interesting to me. Lots of dialogue options are very one note or very very black and white, we'll say. The light side option will be like, hello, I understand you're in distress. What can I do to aid you in these trying times? And then the dark side option will be like, fuck you, I'll cut your head off if you don't tell me what I need to know right now. And it's like that's kind of an exaggeration, but it's not really an exaggeration.
No, it's kind of spot on. And I think that's, so this game, I feel, and I believe canonically you follow the light side path.
Probably.
Like,
yeah.
That from my understanding, both KOTOR games, the canonical path is light side, which I understand because there's just no depth to the dark side. And obviously, if you go through the dark side version of this game, it's going to be much quicker because you just essentially cut yourself off from like a lot of story and, you know, extra side stuff because you either kill people or alienate yourself from them. Almost all of your teammates hate everything you do, so you don't deepen your relationship with them, so you lose out on their story. So yeah, it really is just because you want to use like dark side powers without a penalty, and that's fine. But even then, like the dark side ending is kind of meh.
Yeah, it really seems like I would only do a dark side playthrough out of pure curiosity, not because it seems like it would be fun to role play.
It really isn't that fun, just because, again, it doesn't add anything to it. You don't get more story because you go dark side. I think the only place where you might get a little bit more is on the Sith Academy,
right,
on Korriban. But even then, when you're a light side and you're trying to appear like you're dark side, you're getting more out of that. Because again, you're not killing everybody. You're actually like talking to them and learning and solving puzzles and problems and knowing more about a planet. Like I want to say there's like 3 or 4 times on Terrace where if you do dark side choices, you just lose like 2 hours of story because you're not following down this quest line because you're like, fuck you, I'm going to kill everything.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's just so one note and boring. I've always wanted them to make a Star Wars game that if you actually go to the dark side, there's full story for that. And not just like one point in the game where it'll alter the last couple hours of the game.
Yeah, I can't really think of a Star Wars game that does that. Because the Jedi Fallen Order games, you're following a story. You don't have agency in what side you're on. These ones, the KOTOR games, you can pick the dark side, but like you said, you'll miss out on a bunch of stuff. Maybe that new open world game they're making, if there's, I don't even know if there's Jedi in that game.
I don't think it is. There's one other game where you could choose like light side abilities and dark side abilities, which was the Jedi Academy games.
Oh, right.
But to be honest, there's just a point in the story where you basically choose if you're light and dark. You could have all dark side abilities and choose the light side path once you get to that certain story beat, and it doesn't matter. But for that whole time, you could be like force lightning and choking people and all that, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, it's just that's the one thing. Like, and I guess it's just really, really hard to do with nuance and with a game and add depth to that, because it is the force is very binary. It is the light side and the dark side. I know people are be like, no, Jolie Bindo is a gray Jedi. No, he's not. He's not a gray Jedi.
No.
He is just a light side force user. There is a difference.
Yep.
There is no such thing as a gray Jedi with the force.
I'm glad you mentioned that like binary nature of it, because this morality system really only works if you pick a side and hammer it too. Like if you're in the middle, you're not going to get the benefits of either side. You're just going to be kind of a centrist, and fuck you for being a centrist, I guess. So
no, that's pretty much how it reacts. Like this game kind of forces you have to be one extreme or the other, because I am of the belief that is how the force works. Like, because I'm trying to not rant too long on this, because I know it's a really popular thing in today's age that we like romanticize villains, or people say like, well, a true Jedi Master is someone who could use the dark side and not have it corrupt them. But as we've seen, that's not how it works. The dark side really is the quick and easier path. The more you use it, the more it's harder to not use it. The further you fall down the rabbit hole. You can come back from it, but it's always there nagging and gnawing at you. So that's one of those things, like, there's no in between. There is the light, there is the dark.
Yeah. I guess I thought of another Star Wars game where you get to do dark side stuff, and it's the Force Unleashed games. But those are
that's true.
Those are just kind of like Jedi power fantasy combat games. It's not.
Oh yeah,
it's not
rip a Star Destroyer out of orbit.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's fun though. You know.
Yeah. Anything else about the story in KOTOR that you think is bringing up here in the non-spoiler part?
I will say this. Because I don't think this really spoils anything. There's a lot of unique things that you can do on each of the planets, and there's a lot of rich story and a lot of rich lore involved in each of the planets. Like on Kashyyyk, you get to learn a lot about like the Wookiees and their history and the things that they're dealing with. You know, on Korriban, you get to learn about like the history of all these Dark Lords of the Sith and all that kind of stuff. And it's all really, really cool lore stuff. The downside to it is like it really has nothing to do with the story of the game. So if you're a big Star Wars fan, it's awesome to see all of this stuff. But if you're just like, I like Star Wars, okay, most of this stuff has like no impact on the story, and you're just like, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the only kind of like downside, is like you could do a lot on these planets. That doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, I will give them credit for like really fleshing out history and world building in here. They, RPGs are usually full of this kind of stuff. You're always picking up notes and text logs or whatever that explain the history of the place that you're in, or some person that you're looking at a statue of. And this game's full of that stuff too. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Which is super cool. But again, like, doesn't have a lot of impact on the game sometimes, which is fine.
Yeah. And we're intentionally like leaving out giant parts of the story here. We'll continue that in the spoiler section for sure. But you're just going to have to trust us, I guess, that there is some really interesting stuff that we're steering clear of right now in the non-spoiler part.
It's very hard.
Yeah. So let's talk about how this game looks and how it sounds. I just get this out of the way real quick. I don't think this game's aged very well in the visual department. Some games from this, early 2000s era still look decently good right now. I don't think this game looks great anymore.
No, this is one of those games that when you get it on Steam, you instantly look for like a mod to make the graphics look better, because this aged really poorly. When it came out, it looked great.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Big open zones of places to run around. You're like, I'm running through the desert in Tatooine, and now you play it and it's like, I'm running through this completely empty desert in Tatooine. It's just a giant screen.
Yeah, there's just nothing here.
Yeah. It's cool how the places that you go do look like you feel like they should. Like you go to Tatooine and you're like, oh, this looks, I recognize this from the movies and stuff. You go to Kashyyyk and you see all like the tree villages and stuff like that the Wookiees are living in. And you're like, this is cool. This is very different from everywhere else. But the places where I think it's aged really poorly are the faces look.
Oh, yeah.
They look like early 2000s 3D faces. In the environments, it is an older game. So back then they didn't have the processing power to have a bunch of stuff filling up all the places you go. But it does stand out now that walking on those catwalks in Kashyyyk, there's nothing on them. It's just maybe there's a treasure chest every now and then.
Yeah,
or like some people standing there, but nothing else.
It's one of those things that they did a great job at, like you said. Everything feels unique because Korriban is a very dry planet. It's kind of desert-ish or has desert aspects, but it looks very different from Tatooine. So everywhere looks different. It feels unique, which is awesome. But as you said, there's a lot of, man, there is nothing here. Like on Terrace, for example, when you first kind of leave and you're in the Overcity part, it's just this long open area. There's a few people standing around. Some you can talk to. Some are just kind of like NPCs who are there talking to themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, wow, there's a lot of nothing here.
Yep. I'll ask you, since you're a professional voice actor, what do you think about the voice acting in this game?
Some of it is excellent. But it's also some of the actors who have sort of remained really relevant in the industry. Mm-hmm. My example of that would be Bastila, who's voiced by Jennifer Hale. And she is a legend in the industry, and she is awesome. But then other folks, you can tell, like, oh, they didn't really do a lot after this, or, this was like their first or second role. Like, it was an early role for them. Like, so there is that mix. Like, some of the voice actors are incredible. Some of them are just like, did you just do audiobooks before this? Like, what did you do? And I do sort of understand it because it's one of those challenges as a voice actor that you sometimes face, particularly if it's a property that you're not familiar with. A lot of the things that you have to say or talk about and treat like serious and real just sounds like nonsense. Like some of the stuff that you would have to say for this game, literally sounds like, we've got to stop the Goopy Gops from coming into Mos Eisley. Otherwise, the Tusken Raiders are going to bebop all over the Stambop. And it's like, you have to say that shit seriously and act like it matters. And it's like, if you don't know anything about Star Wars, it's just a gig, it's just a job for you. You're like, what the fuck is this shit I'm supposed to say? It's sort of like, I think the way I could compare it is like a way a lot of people talk about Star Trek, The Next Generation, where it's a lot of what they call like Treknobabble, because they'll say a lot of like tech sounding shit that just like it sounds like nonsense because it's not real technology they're talking about, but because they use it so much, you're just like, what the fuck are they saying? So I do think there's a little bit of that here. But yeah, Jen Hale kills it. She's awesome in this.
Yeah. I came out of this, I didn't think that like the individual voice actors were bad or anything like that. It's just, it feels like this is from an era where voice acting in video games was super hit and miss, and I'm not sure about like was it a voice direction issue, or is it just like, hey, all these people recorded their lines extremely separately from one another, and so like you can tell they're not talking to each other. Sometimes it sounds like they're not even responding to somebody saying the line to them. It sounds like this is my line, I'm going to read my line. I don't have great context for what's going on in the scene. I'm just reading my line. And this kind of sounds like that in this game.
No, my guess is they had them all individually hit the booth with just a freaking Bible worth of text. Because again, the depending on the character, so somebody like Karth, who is kind of present from the beginning of the game until the end of the game, Bastil is the same way. They had so much dialogue, and then you're also having to do it, okay, now act as if they were evil. Okay, now act if they were good. Okay, act if they were in the middle. Okay, tell this part of your backstory, but be angry. Tell this part, but be like aloof, like, so I think it was just so much. And so, yeah, it's a challenge. You could definitely tell with like some of the Sith, kind of NPCs, like the extras, like, hey, go watch like A New Hope and listen to how those British guys do the Sith soldiers. Yeah, do something like that. Because all of them are like the same British accent, and it's kind of hilarious.
It's also worth noting that your character doesn't talk in KOTOR, so
which just takes you out of it sometimes.
Yeah, and so like, and your party members don't often talk to each other. So a lot of times it does sound like someone is just talking at you as the character, just because they're not responding to something that you said. Really, I will say it was funny how they do the voices for all the different species that don't speak English in here. So there's people doing Wookiee voices. There's people doing I forget the race that's doing the that voice.
Yeah. The Rhodians.
The Rhodians.
Yeah, like Greedo.
It's kind of funny how like some of those characters do that voice, and then you'll go talk to another one of those. Would you say the Rhodians? You'll talk to another Rhodian, and it will just sound like me. It'll be like, "What's up?"
Yeah. Hey, what's going on? It's one of those things. Like I appreciate it because it is on a scale at that time. It's incredible because it's like there's so many voices, there's so many characters that you can interact with. Some of it's just like, oh, nice little quick conversation. Some of it's like you can talk to this guy for like 15 minutes. But yeah, some of it not great. Like you could definitely tell there was a wide range of voice talent for this particular game.
Yeah, that particular like Rhodian voice only has like 2 or 3 lines too that just repeat. They alternate back and forth. But the Wookiees sound good. Whoever was doing the Wookiee voices, they gave their all. It sounds great. There's I don't know what the species of Yodas is called, but I
can't remember.
Yeah, there's one of them. They sound like a little Yoda dude. And also want to shout out something I think is great and something that I think is really important for Star Wars media, which is sound effects and music. Obviously, music in Star Wars is super iconic, and just using Star Wars music and little Star Wars, little musical stings as a scene opens or something like that. It all sounds great. And then Star Wars is full of iconic sound effects. The lightsabers, Star Wars blasters sound like Star Wars blasters. Wookiees, TIE fighters, all of these iconic sounds are perfect. And that stuff really sets like there's like this intangible, like, oh, this is Star Wars. And I think sound plays like a huge part in that.
No, I agree. I think when you talk about immersion, that is one of the things I think that can get you immersed into Star Wars so quickly is those familiar sound effects, and just like instantly you're like, yes, this is a Star Wars game. To be honest, so I played after this game, after KOTOR and KOTOR 2, they did Jade Empire. I played a little bit of it. It was cool. I just didn't play a ton of it. But when Mass Effect came out, I was like, okay, here we go. Like a better version of KOTOR. Let's go. I couldn't get into it. And a big part of that was the lacking of familiarity with like the comfort stuff of Star Wars, which is a lot of the sound effects. Yeah. And, so it was hard for me to get into it because I'm like, well, the blasters don't sound like I think a blaster should sound and things like that. So yeah, I know that's weird to say, but yeah, that was one of the things that made it tough for me.
Well, it is. I mean, like you and I have grown up with Star Wars is like a big part of our lives. And so the sound effects that accompany it and the music that accompanies it, like when you boot up KOTOR for the first time and you start a new game, you get the big text scroll at the beginning, just like one of the movies. And as soon as that starts, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at home here.
Yeah. Chewie, we're home.
So, aesthetically, I think that like some parts have aged better than others, but I think the stuff that really matters, I think they did get right more often than not.
One of the little touches, and I wasn't really sure where else to add this, but one of the really touches that I really like is the ability to pick your lightsaber color outside of just like green or blue. Like the fact that you could get purple or you could get, yellow or, that was a really cool thing that made it feel more of a personal Star Wars, because I'm able to make the choice of, well, what if I want a purple lightsaber or a yellow lightsaber? And you could do that. So I that's just one of those small things that really, it's the dream everybody had. It's like if you could, nowadays, I mean, you can go to Galaxy's Edge and make a lightsaber or order a lightsaber from a billion websites. But in 2003, we wanted to make our own lightsaber.
And the new Star Wars games, the Jedi Survivor and stuff, is like you can do whatever the hell you want with your lightsaber,
which is pretty great.
It's pretty sick.
That is one of the things that pulls it in closer for me.
What color did you go with?
Purple.
Yeah, me too. Got to go like my man Mace Windu.
Purple's my favorite color, so yeah, anytime I get a chance, it's all purple.
Purple is like one of my like top favorite colors too, and I think Mace Windu plays a pretty significant role in that. Yeah.
You know why he chose the purple lightsaber?
Because he wanted to have a color that no one else had, right?
Mm-hmm. It's because he knew that they were doing the big fight scene at the end of Attack of the Clones, where there's, it's Obi-Wan and Anakin, they're rescuing them, and there's a bunch of Jedi fighting battle droids.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make sure that you could tell who he was in the battle. So he wanted to stand out from the blue and the green, and that's why he has purple. Because he's talking to George Lucas, and he's like, and George Lucas is like, good guys have blue and green, and bad guys have red. And he's like, what about purple? And George Lucas was like, I think we could do purple.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's literally why purple lightsabers are a thing, because Sam Jackson was just like, what about purple?
Yeah.
And his lightsaber has bad motherfucker engraved on it.
Yes, it does.
Which is the best thing.
God bless Sam Jackson.
A gem of a man.
So the gameplay in KOTOR is based on the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars role-playing game, which is itself based on Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition. So it's not as like directly D&D as Baldur's Gate, but it is based on D&D. It's based on dice rolls. It's based on, the length of an attack round and how many attacks you get per round and stuff like that. It is real time with pause combat, so you kind of issue commands and everything plays out in real time. You can pause it at any time to change what you want a character to be doing or to like queue up an ability or something like that. I want to point out, because on my Baldur's Gate episodes, I kind of like, I didn't trash them for having bad combat, but I did kind of trash them for not trying to teach people who don't know D&D. Because in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, they're like, if you don't know the rules, good luck. Read the entire manual or something.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's if you're familiar with 2nd edition D&D, it's like it's great for you, but not for me. KOTOR though is much more streamlined, much simpler, like extremely simple compared to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and 3 for that matter. So for people who don't have history with D&D, you can just jump into KOTOR and learn the combat and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think they do a pretty decent job of explaining it to you, introducing it to you. They bring you along relatively slowly in terms of, difficulty for battles, and, here's where you would use a grenade in battle. Here's where a ranged person would be useful. Like, they really do a good job. Like the very, very opening part of the game when you're on the ship before you go to Terrace, I think does a great job of kind of laying out, like, this is how you play, this is how you use the abilities, this is the importance of using and unlocking certain abilities. So they do a really good job. So I don't think like anybody would just not understand how to play if you start at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and it's so simplified compared again to Baldur's Gate, where you'll have like hundreds of spells that you maybe you don't need to memorize all of them, but you're going to come across, dozens and dozens and dozens of spells across the course of a game. In KOTOR, there's like, I don't know, 15 abilities that you can like learn and then upgrade throughout the entire game, which I think is too simple in the grand scheme of things. There's basically like your ranged fighters, your melee fighters, and your droids. They all have like their own version of the same 5 abilities, basically. Yeah. So it ends up being a little bit too simple for me, but I do appreciate that they're like, hey, we're going to put this on consoles. We want to reach the Star Wars audience, not just the D&D audience. We got to make sure people can play this. And they did that at least.
Yeah. I do think if you didn't have force abilities in this game, like if you were not playing a character who gets to use the force, the combat would be mind-numbing and would be terrible because there's awful. Just no flavor to it other than, well, I did my power attack. I guess I'll do quick attack. And you still do a lot of that, even as a Jedi, but at least you can sprinkle in abilities here and there. So it is the saving grace. But if you didn't have that, it is too simple. They could have gone a little bit more complex, or like, to quote Star Wars, you could take your first step into a larger world once you become a Jedi, but you kind of don't. It's sort of like, here's your force powers. Go for it. And it's just this, you do pretty much the same 3 or 4 things every battle.
Yeah. You've got your, once you become a Jedi, you get the ability to use cool stuff like you can disable droids, you can do lightsaber throws, you can do flurry attacks. You can, if you go to the dark side, you can do like force lightning and mind control and stuff like that. You got your force push and a lot of the classic Jedi powers. Once you become a Jedi in this game, it's something I think is cool. Like early in the game, you're just a dude with a metal sword and a blaster, and you're capable during that time. Yeah. But then like halfway, 2/3 of the way through the game, you're a Jedi, you're a force of nature. And I really like that power curve because if I'm a Jedi, I shouldn't struggle in combat fighting some animals or I think by the time you get to probably your 3rd planet looking for the Starforge, at that point you feel pretty badass. Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, like I've got enough abilities that things are relatively easy. Like you said, most fights you're kind of cutting through things, especially if you've gone like destroy droid and disable droid, like packs of droids, you're like, nothing, I got this, and you're just taking them out left and right, which I feel like that's how you should feel as like playing as a Jedi character. You should feel really strong, except for when you're facing another force using character. So like the battles with the Sith or the Dark Jedi, those are more challenging, but not like backbreakingly difficult. It's enough of a challenge at that point where you feel engaged in the combat and in the battle, but everything else, they're kind of chumps. Like you're just cutting through them.
Yep.
It's even more so in the second game. Like once you get further into the second game, especially if you're dark side, it's over. You've beaten the game and you've still got 10 hours to play because nothing can threaten you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to a point in this game where there was like one combat encounter that I can remember, and it was like a security droid or something like that wiped my party several times. I was able to puzzle my way through that encounter. The rest of the time, I was kind of on autopilot with the combat, including in the final boss. It's just, you get to a point where nothing can really touch you, and you can just pause it and heal anytime you want. So if you have a bunch of healing items, you're also just going to be fine.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those things that you pick up pretty quickly as you go through. You're like, oh, this is what I need to do in terms of healing stuff. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think the only real struggles I would have would be like the surprise fight with a Sith, like early on. Like I think it's like the first planet that you go to or the second planet, you'll kind of like walk into a room and there's a Dark Jedi there, and you're still really early in the game, so you're not that strong. So that tends to be really tough. But as you said, once you get later in, you're basically unstoppable, especially if you have other Jedi in your party.
I was just going to ask you, like, you have a bunch of interesting characters. Like you can have a Wookiee, and you can have an assault droid, an assassin droid on your team. You have a Mandalorian you can take with you. That's these warrior people. Did you find any reason to not just roll with 3 Jedi though?
Not really, no. The only time I don't is when I play the dark side. So I would just have like HK and Canderous and the other droid like T2160 or something like that. But yeah, no, like like light side 4 Jedi. Nothing stops you because you can like, here's my healer. This guy's going to be my healer and like status buff guy. This person's going to take out droids. This person's going to, be a lightsaber expert. Like, there's some points that it's just no point to not use the Jedi unless you just really like interacting with certain characters or
right. So there were a couple of planets where I would be like, you know what? I'm not going to take all the Jedi. I'm going to take, Zalbar and I'm going to take someone else and just roll and like try to make this a little bit more interesting because, like we've said, if you have 3 Jedi in the party, nothing is really going to stop you. No. You'll be fine.
Especially like, because Bastila has some really good abilities and by the time, there's no point. The only reason you would carrying like one of the droids is useful because they can unlock doors and stuff like that. That's kind of the only real reason.
Yeah, there are sections in the game too where you'll have to take like a specific party or like some people won't be available to you, so then you mix it up then as well. But yeah, why would you not take easily your 3 most powerful characters with you if you're at all worried about combat,
No, I agree. It's just, do yourself a favor. Just take all the Jedi every time. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So again, I think that this combat feels like BioWare figuring out how to do this real time with pause combat, this D&D based combat on consoles, as opposed to where they came from with Baldur's Gate. And then I don't remember the second game well enough to say confidently if it's any different in the second game, but definitely when they get to Mass Effect and then Mass Effect 2 in particular, it was like, okay, they got this. They figured out the console RPG,
Yeah, no, there's not a huge change from the first game to the second game. A little bit with distance closing abilities. Like they add a little bit more of that, but like your big forced leap, you'll just be like leaping from enemy to enemy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not really. It's basically the same, almost exact same combat.
You just reminded me of how you leap like in this game. That's one of the abilities you unlock is the ability to leap across the entire map when you like start combat with an enemy, and it's very funny because this is a game from 2003.
Oh yeah, it's super clunky looking. Did you go 1 lightsaber, 2 single ones, or 1 double one?
I think I went double lightsaber if I remember.
I did too. That's my go-to is double lightsaber, which why wouldn't you? You're going to deal so much more damage with that.
Yeah. You can also go like dual wielding lightsabers, which is cool too, and cool and flashy. You get, 2 different color lightsabers if you want, and just go to town. But I always, it's the little kid in me that saw Darth Maul and was like, that's the coolest fucking dude I've ever seen.
Yes, this is it's always strange when I tell people this or people, I'm like, I love the Phantom Menace. It is literally one of my favorite Star Wars things ever. And people are like, what? It's terrible. Jar Jar. And I'm like, no. You don't understand. That was a Star Wars movie that basically isn't a Skywalker saga movie. It's just like, here's Jedi. They're fighting Dark Jedi. They're fighting droids. They're just doing their thing. Yeah, Anakin's annoying, but he doesn't really matter in Phantom Menace. Like, it's more Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's story. So, and Darth Maul is literally the coolest Star Wars villain next to Darth Vader. Like, I have him tattooed on me. He's so cool. Like, I have multiple things signed by Ray Park near me. Like,
nice.
You see that red lightsaber, boom, boom. You're just like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen in my entire life.
Yep, absolutely. So we transfer that to this game with the double lightsaber for sure.
Got to.
Yeah. Anything else about the gameplay that we think is worth mentioning?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward, and it's not. Yeah, there's not a lot super depth wise. Like some of the force powers get kind of cool. particularly the dark side ones, because you get like from Force Lightning, you get like Force Storm or something where it's just massive lightning bolts are striking all the enemies in the area. But again, like that, yeah, it's just so late in the game by the time you would actually get that ability that, yeah,
you're okay without that stuff because you've gotten to that point.
Yeah, it's like you've gone this far. You're this is just icing on the cake at this point.
It is pretty cool that the dark side power, like we talked about how from a role-playing perspective, the dark side playthrough is a little bit of a letdown, but from a combat and power fantasy perspective, the dark side gets to have all the fun.
Yeah, I think if you didn't do that, there would be no reason to do it.
Right.
Like if you didn't have like, well, I get this cool thing, I get to basically be just a tornado of lightning bolts. Then,
exactly.
Why would you do it?
So let's get into some wrap-up thoughts here and answer the question, who would we recommend play Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic in 2023?
Honestly, I think if you're a Star Wars fan, like more so than just like a casual, like, oh yeah, I watched some of the movies, like, yeah, it's fine. No, I think if you're somebody who you're watching every new episode of every Star Wars show, like the day it comes out on Disney Plus, you've seen the movie several times. Like if you're like a legitimate fan, I think this is one you want to check out. If it's for some reason slipped by you, I think you should definitely try it, just because, especially with, the work that Dave Filoni has done, because he draws a lot from, he's drawn stuff from the Old Republic and has put it in the new shows, and it's great. So I think if you're a Star Wars fan, it's 1,000% worth a play. But if you don't love Star Wars, I don't think this is a game for you. It's not in 2023. I think from just like across the board, combat, gameplay, visuals, I don't think there's enough there that if you don't love Star Wars, that would make you go, yeah, this is fun. The characters are interesting. The story is great. But I don't think that's enough if you're not a Star Wars fan. Because if you're not, you're just going to be like, "What? Who cares about this Jedi person? Like, whatever. Like, what's the big deal?"
Yeah.
So if you are a fan, it's a must play. Like, or a must watch. Like, go watch like a supercut or something of some of the story. But I would highly recommend playing it because the experience of it is so great.
Yeah, your character goes on, a little. I mean, we'll talk about a little bit in the spoiler section, but your character does go on a bit of a classic hero's journey in here. So being a part of that as, video games as an interactive medium give you a chance to take part in that. And so for me personally, that is lost if I just watch something on YouTube.
Agreed.
And like this game's combat, like we said, is streamlined to the point where if you're not normally a BioWare RPG person, if you don't know a lot about D&D, you'll be fine. This is not a super difficult game to get the hang of. But I do agree with you that like it's an obvious recommendation for Star Wars fans who never played it, because like we kind of touched on a little bit, and we'll get in further in the spoiler section, this game does a really cool job of like really digging into things that you already knew about Star Wars, but not to the level that like this story will take you to. Which is very cool. But if you don't care about the life of a Jedi, and if you don't care about how easy it is to fall to the dark side, and if you don't care about the history of, the old Sith Lords and stuff like that, then I don't know that this game's going to give you a great story outside of that stuff. It is a Star Wars-ass story.
Yeah, I think if you aren't already in, it's not going to make you come in, because you're going to be like, this is a lot of, it'll just sound like I said, it'll just sound like nonsense to you, because you're just like, what is this? So yeah, if you're not already a fan, I don't think it'll make you one, because I think it's so much and so in depth that it's a little off-putting if you're not a fan.
Yeah. The Star Wars movies are for getting everybody into Star Wars for the first time. And then like this game is like, okay, so you love the movies, let's go deeper, you know?
Yeah, this really is the like, you want more and you want to go deep, come on in.
Yep.
You know, but if you ain't there, it's not going to jive with you.
Yep. Which is what you would expect from, this is BioWare at the peak of their powers in the early 2000s and continuing on a little bit as the Mass Effect and Dragon Age series went. BioWare's in a pretty unfortunate spot at this point in time in 2023. But I guess if you're like, I really loved Mass Effect and like, maybe you loved Baldur's Gate back in the day and you liked how BioWare made their RPGs, then that would be another person to check out KOTOR as well. Because, you know, a lot of those standard BioWare game design things, they're in this game too.
Yeah, for that sense, it's certainly cool. Like if you're a big Mass Effect fan, it's cool to probably spend a couple hours with this just so you can see like, oh, I see where this started, you know? But if you're not, man, if you're not a fan, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Especially on Terrace, where you're going to be like, I don't give a shit about any of this. Where's this lightsaber? Where's my force power?
Yeah, I was going to give the general recommendation for everyone who's thinking about playing KOTOR that like, yeah, everyone, I don't think I've talked to anyone who's like, I fucking love Terrace, you know? So
nobody loves Terrace.
We get it. Like, it kind of sucks. If you push through it, like the cool stuff starts coming more and more after that. But everyone's kind of in agreement
immediately. Like you get off Terrace, it's like instant, like good stuff.
Yeah. But it's like everyone's just kind of in agreement. Like, yeah, you got to push through that early part where it seems like nothing cool is ever going to happen. So
yeah. Or you got to really look for the cool stuff, like the bounty hunter fight, or not the bounty hunter fight, but like there's like a fight pit that you can do. Yeah. That's kind of cool. The swoop racing is cool.
The people down in the sewers, like they have interesting stories. There's a guy down there who's like hundreds of years old, but looks like he's, you know, a regular person for some reason. Like there's little mini stories down there that are kind of interesting, but like you're playing this because you want to be a Jedi. So everyone in the back of their head's like, fuck, man, when's it going to happen?
Yeah. And that is kind of the bummer because they put so much care and love into like making, you know, like, I don't know if you did it, but did you make like the cure for Rakghoul disease or whatever?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like that's a really long quest line and like a lot that you can do. And you can really have like all those people of the Undercity, you can help. We're going to help you guys move to a better place. And it's like really cool. But again, you're like, when do I get the lightsaber?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer in that regard where it's great stuff, but holy shit, cut it in half.
I was told that there would be lightsabers.
Yeah, if you put a lot of that stuff on the other side of becoming a Jedi, way better.
Yep.
Way better.
Yep. So it is a qualified recommendation, but it is a good game. And I think that like, you know, a lot of people go to KOTOR for the story and the story does hold up. It is really good. So worth playing if you're interested in that. Mick, tell people about anything that you want to tell them about, because you are a man of many talents around gaming and voice acting and Twitch streaming and all kinds of stuff. So talk about what you do.
Well, I am part of speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, I am part of a D&D troupe on Twitch called Playotic Games, and we play a variety of stuff. I've DM'd a couple of campaigns. I'm actually wrapping up one by the time this comes out. I will be done, but I'm running a Star Wars 5e campaign right now. Our last episode is actually next week. So, but that was cool. I ran a Final Fantasy 5e campaign for a few months there, which was a lot of fun. We do a lot of one shots. We do a lot of stuff to raise money for charity. We do a lot of stuff, and it's a really good time. We've got a lot of really talented individuals that are there. So that is one of the biggest things that I do. In addition to that, I am a professional voice actor, which means you can hire me to voice something for your project. Whatever it may be, reach on out to me, and I will more than happily talk to you about it. But you can hear me regularly playing psychopaths, murderers, and old men on Doorway to Nightmare. Always old men. I don't know what it is. I get typecast a lot. I play psychos, serial killers, and really old people. No idea why, but you can hear that on Doorway to Nightmare, which is on YouTube. It's a horror series where it's all sorts of short form horror and mystery stories. I voice a variety of voices there. I also voice a werewolf in an ongoing werewolf series called Renegade Shadow, which you can find at Rhonda Parker's YouTube channel, Words by Parker. I was also part of the novelette that she did called Endgame, which was a zombie story, and I voiced a couple of people in that, which was really cool. I've got a couple of things that I'm working on that I can't talk about because I signed an NDA. But
okay.
Yeah, hopefully I can talk about them sooner than later. But one thing that I can talk about is right now I'm in the process of working on, I hate to call it a short film because I don't think that accurately describes what it is. But I am in the process of working on a film project right now. It is going to be a slasher movie, very heavily inspired by movies from the 80s that are slasher movies. So it is a horror project, and I'm writing it, directing it, and doing God knows what else with it because wearing many hats with that one. But that's something that I'm in the process of working on.
Sick.
Hopefully I'll be shooting that early next year. That's the plan because there's a lot of work and stuff going into it, but keep a lookout on for that. And I'm about to become a dad, so that's cool.
Hell yeah.
And he does have he has a Star Wars name.
Ooh.
Yes, his name is Dante Rex. His middle name is Rex.
Oh,
so
yeah. Awesome.
He's got a Star Wars character name. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm coming to dad. That had nothing to do with anything, but that's another thing that I did. So,
but it also has everything to do with everything. So, yeah,
yes.
Congrats, man.
Thank you. It's very exciting. He will be here before I know it.
Yeah. By the time this episode comes out. So, by the time
I was
people
about
hear
to say,
this,
he's going to be here in like 3 weeks. So,
awesome. Everyone who's listening, really recommend checking out the stuff that Mick does. You can go on the Playotic Games YouTube channel and check out that Star Wars campaign if you want to.
If
you want to watch that.
Oh, and I'm on Twitch as well at Mick Arcade.
Yeah, Twitch.
See, I haven't been streaming as much lately. I'm trying to get back into it. You know, I need more time.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I need more time, and I'm about to have a whole lot less of it. So.
Exactly. Yeah. You can go follow Mick on Twitch. Always entertaining stuff. Check down in the show notes for links for all of the stuff that was just listed there. And in the next minute or so, when I'm talking about myself, you can tune me out because you heard me say the same stuff last week, and you can go check out the stuff that Mick is doing. Highly recommended. So now's the time to start clicking around because if you want to support Tales from the Backlog, I would really appreciate it if you would help me spread the word, whether it's sharing on social media, telling people in Discord servers that you're in, stuff like that. It's really helpful. I am very proud of the show, and I hope people enjoy it. People seem to enjoy it. So why not tell someone you enjoy it? Yeah. If you want to support monetarily, it is patreon.com/realdavejackson. where for just a couple bucks a month, you can vote in polls for what games I do on the show. You'll get some bonus content. Higher tiers have extra rewards, including my retro gaming monthly show called Tales from the Way Backlog, which is a lot of fun if anyone knows me and my proclivities toward retro gaming. You can also leave a rating and review if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podcast Addict. It's highly appreciated. And my other podcast is called A Top 3 Podcast, where we've done some Star Wars stuff or some topics that have Star Wars conversations. We do top 3 lists on that show. We did top 3 fictional vehicles, which could have just been a Star Wars topic. We did top 3 fictional battles, which included some Star Wars stuff. Again, could have focused on Star Wars there if we wanted to. So if you want to hear me talk about stuff that's not games, that's the place. So Mick and I are going to take a break, and when we come back, full spoiler time for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Okay, Mick and I are back, and it is full spoiler time for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And this is, if you're listening to this because you tuned out or you're enjoying the music too much, the real fucking spoilers are starting. So get out if you don't want to be spoiled on basically the most famous thing about the game that you probably already heard that this is here, but, anyway, starting now. So, this game's probably most famous thing other than... No, this probably is the most famous thing.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, the twist that you are not just a random dude who is, mysteriously great at using the Force. We mentioned earlier that Darth Revan had disappeared, and it turns out that that's you. You are Darth Revan, and you have been brainwashed by the Jedi to basically forget who you are, and then they probably hope that they can use you for their own means, because you forgot who you were, but you did not lose any of your power in the Force. Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about this. The first time you played this, did you see this coming?
Not at all.
Me either.
I never saw it coming whatsoever. I think they do such a good job of, it's not even misdirect. There's just like no real hint that you are Revan. There's nobody who's like, you look familiar. Like, that never happens because, well, Revan wears a mask. So you don't know what Revan looks like. Revan could be a man. Revan could be a woman. They could be an alien. Like, no one knows. And when you see the flashbacks of Revan, which are very few and far between, again, no real hint that it might be you. You're just like, yeah, no, I'm a soldier in the Republic, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's done really well.
I'm a special boy. I'm a video game protagonist. Of course I'm good at the Force.
I think that's kind of what it does, is it hides it enough because you're like, well, I'm the main character. Of course I'm good. Yeah. Like, why, I could be a Jedi, like, but there's nothing that hints to it really. Well, hold on. I say that there's probably a couple of things, like, mostly like the way the Jedi Council treats you, in particular, like one member is a giant dick to you. Mm-hmm. So you could maybe think that was a little weird, but you could also be like, man, this guy's a dickhead. Like,
yeah. So my first time playing it, I was blindsided by this. I thought it was like the coolest thing that had ever happened in a video game story. And so like, it was really interesting replaying it this time because I know the twist. So like, there's some pieces of media that rely on a twist to make you like it. Like this twist was really fucking crazy. Therefore, I enjoyed the entire experience because I was just blindsided by this. And so I was wondering, like, is KOTOR one of those? Is it a good story without the twist? And the answer is yes, I think. Mm-hmm. And the other question I had was, okay, so now I know there's a twist. Do they leave you some breadcrumbs that, because you just have the mentality that I'm a video game protagonist, all of this makes sense because I'm the main character, and you just ignore all the stuff that's there. And there's a lot that's there. It's cool, but it's nothing so obvious that like I at least ever questioned any of it because we're so used to everything revolving around us.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it work. It's one of those things that, like you said, it's I think like about The Sixth Sense. With that movie, when you know the twist of it, which I won't spoil just in case nobody's seen a movie from 1996 that is the most spoiled thing in the world. But
exactly.
When you watch that movie and you know the twist, you can really pick stuff up like super easy the second time. Mm-hmm. And then almost to a point where like there's really no point in watching it more than twice because after that it's not that great of a movie that it justifies it. But as you said, with this, I think there is a lot of replayability even knowing that. And man, I'm trying to think. I'm like, were there any breadcrumbs that I picked up? I miss them every time.
Yeah. So what I picked up on, again, I'm playing this, I'm taking podcast notes while I'm playing and stuff like that. The Jedi Council you mentioned, like there's a couple characters that mention how odd it is that you go to the Jedi home planet and immediately get an audience with the Jedi Council. Like, Karth is like, hey man, what the fuck? Like, no one just goes and talks to them. Like, what's going on with you? Who are you? What's up? And you're like, well, I don't know. I'm a video game protagonist. They want to talk to me because it's my turn.
Yeah, that's what I do.
There are a couple of the Starforge map areas where they have like security systems that they're like, oh, right this way, sir. Like, Revan built that stuff. So But even that was not obvious enough for me. It was like, oh, I'm a powerful Jedi. They let me in because I'm strong in the Force or something like that. And it's only like in like the hour or so leading up to when they actually tell you, where characters will talk to you and they'll be like, you don't remember what's going on, do you? And by that point, maybe you're starting to get a little clue. I wasn't.
No, I think they cover their tracks well enough, because like the thing with the Jedi and your ability and Force, I seem to remember they say it's because you and Bastila have an unexplained connection in the Force. Like you're a dyad essentially in the Force. So if I remember correctly, that was why. Because for some reason, the instant you meet her, she's like, I feel we are connected in the Force and blah, blah, blah. So you're just like, of course, because I'm a video game protagonist.
Yeah.
And I'm a special boy. So like they sprinkle stuff, but they also like give you the, at face value reason of like, oh, well, because you saved her and then she got connected to you or whatever. And you're like, of course, because I'm, it's what I do as a video game protagonist.
Yeah. Exactly. One other thing I think is really one of the keys to like keeping you off the trail, I think, of this is your character has amnesia in this game, but it is not a story about your character recovering their lost memories like so many stories about characters with amnesia are.
Yeah.
You have conversations where someone might ask you about where you came from. And you're like, I don't know. I woke up on the ship. I can't remember. But it's not like, go to this place and you might find something to unlock your lost memories. Like no one gives you those quests. Did you play, like I was thinking about Planescape Torment. Did you play that?
Yes, it's been a while though.
Yeah. In that game, your character is an amnesiac and there's a lot of stuff about like finding who you were and what you did and how you know these people. It's one of the main focuses of the story in that game. And it's really cool, but that is what like a main part of that game is about. And in this game, your character just happens to not remember. It's not like you're just a dude basically who doesn't remember where you came from. But again, it's not like you need to go to Kashyyyk because there's an artifact there that might unlock your memories. No one gives you that stuff. So you're not constantly thinking about your own backstory. You're thinking about, I got to get these star maps and I got to catch up to Malik and all of that stuff.
I remember there's like, I believe it's when you're on Terrace, there's a conversation where Karth is, you're asking Karth questions and trying to get to know him. And he asks you something and it sort of changes depending on what your class is. Like if you're a scout or if you're a soldier or whatever. And your answer is just really something vague. Like, oh, I'm a soldier in the Republic. I served blah, blah, blah. Or, oh, I'm a scout for the Republic. Like it's something that's just so mundane and vague. Like you don't even really go into detail because again, it's like, well, I have to be like a faceless protagonist because, I could be a man, I could be a woman, I could be, a soldier, I could be a scout, I could be, whatever the case may be. So again, it's nothing that makes you go like, oh, wait, until like right before you find out. And then it's like bashing you over the head, like something's amiss.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up Karth because Karth is a dick to you for most of the game. And part of the reason why he's a dick is because you're getting all this special treatment that no one should get. And he's like dumbfounded by how everyone's treating you when you're supposed to be just like this regular dude. And he's like, I'm a war hero too. Like,
he's like, I do things. You don't do things like I do, Karth.
Yeah. So yeah, what happened was there was a big battle. And I think that's why you have that connection with Bastila is because she was involved
because of
in
the
that.
battle meditation. She actually defeated. She was using her battle meditation, and Malik fired on Revan's ship, betraying him. And basically, Revan got knocked out, and Bastila was able to. I think she's why your memory is like clouded or wiped or whatever. So that's why you're connected in the Force together.
Yeah, and then the Jedi. Basically like fully wiped you to make sure that, I guess, protect the galaxy from one of the strongest Sith, but also they're like, hey, he lost his memories. Maybe we can use him.
And he was a Jedi at one point.
Yeah. So this kind of like sets up, you find out that you're the missing Sith Lord. And you now have the choice. Like, it's presented more to you as a choice here than earlier in the game, where it's like, do you want to be a dick to people or do you want to be nice to people? Now they're like, do you want to continue working against Malik and try to take down the Sith? Or do you want to just say fuck the Jedi for what they did and go back to the dark side? And this kind of sets up that choice, because they show you that, like, hey, the Jedi are doing some war crimes here. And
yeah, basically.
How do you want to react to that?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it interesting, because before you find out that you were Revan, you were the Dark Lord of the Sith, the big bad head honcho, it is just I guess you can be an asshole to people, if you want credits, if you want. But now it's an actual choice, and it is one of those things of, you can legitimately be mad at the Jedi because it's pretty, like you said, they're basically committing a war crime. Like, they are using you as a weapon with your amnesiac state to try and control what you do. So you have that ability to say either yes or no. So it's cool when you get to look at like the dark side choices from that lens. But it's still a little while before you find out that you're Revan. So by this point, you've probably already decided to go one way or the other just based on like Force abilities.
Yeah, and, role playing too. But this at least gives you an interesting reason to go to the dark side, where if you're role playing, or if you're just, if you're someone who's playing this and you're like, I can take or leave the Jedi. They're not my religion or anything like that. So now they're presenting them as complicated, doing bad things, controlling people, manipulating people. You are justified if you want to go to the dark side, or if you just want to say, hey, fuck both sides. Like, I will fight the dark side, but I'm not on board with everything the Jedi are doing.
Yeah, which I think is the canonical ending. Revan disappears after the Starforge. It's like Revan just completely disappears. So yeah, it's one of those things of, you basically go light side, but then you're like, nah, fuck the Jedi, I'm out of here. Like, that's sort of what appears to happen.
And I just like, I talked about this in the non-spoiler part, but this is what I meant when I said, or this is one of the things that I was, thinking of when I was talking about how it kind of portrays the Jedi in a different way than we're used to in the movies and stuff like that. It wasn't really until, in my opinion, the sequel trilogy, when you start to see, the Jedi and the villains, I guess, the Sith with Kylo Ren being portrayed in like a more nuanced way.
Yeah.
In the prequels, they showed that the Jedi aren't perfect because they fucked up the whole Anakin thing. But the Emperor in the prequels is still the Emperor, this, cackling evil maniac. Yeah. Whereas like in the sequel trilogy, they actually give you a good character in Kylo Ren, in my opinion. And it's like also in this game, they portray this with a lot more nuance than we had been used to, I guess, if you played this in 2003.
Yeah. I think Kylo's portrayal and the struggle with the dark side is super interesting because it does provide that depth and nuance. You don't get that with the dark side in this game because it is like, I'll kill you and take your credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, but that's the difference in almost 20 years of time and writing and stuff there. But no, I agree. I think it wouldn't just be like a, yes, I'm evil all the time. Like, no, it is one of those things. And you see it with a couple of different characters, like Juhani's like that, where she struggled with Jedi expectation and fell to the dark side because of it.
Yep.
But then you talk to her and make her realize like, no, I can come back from this, which is interesting because I think it was Juhani's master or somebody that worked with Juhani. They fall to the dark side and go to the academy on Korriban. Which was a nice little cool touch. Or like Jolie, he becomes disillusioned with like the politics of the Jedi Council and just all their nonsense, and he's like, forget this, I'm gonna go live in like the deepest darkest forest on Kashyyyk, and nobody will bother me. And
Yep.
I'm like, relatable. So yeah, I think there's a lot that they did in the sequel trilogy that was really good with Kylo Ren's character, and I'm sure some people are punching their listening device as I say that, but it's true. Like, villains don't always need to be like, ha ha ha, you know, like, no, they can have a little bit of depth, because ultimately, like, Kylo was not a villain. You know, he was somebody who couldn't handle the pressures and felt betrayed,
Yep.
which sort of Darth Revan, same thing.
Yeah, this game shows you multiple people who could not handle the pressure of being a Jedi and either fell completely to the dark side, like with Juhani, or just said, hey, fuck all this. I'm going to go live in the jungle, like Jolie.
Which, God bless him.
Yeah. Love to have just like a cranky old man as a party character. Whereas, again, the Jedi are always portrayed in this like very uptight professional manner, and Jolie's like, yeah, I can use the Force, but like, hey, this shit sucks. It sucks on both sides.
It's terrible. And Bastila has the same thing too. You know, she has that, and she falls at one point in the game. You know, she falls to the dark side largely because she crumbles under the pressure of, I have this super powerful ability the Jedi requires, and they depend on me, and they need me to use this ability. Fuck them. Why am I doing this for that? Like, it really is that just that's sort of the feel like a big theme in this game is just struggling under expectation and pressure.
Yeah.
You know, you're expected to be a Jedi. You're expected to be this like perfect Zen master, but like none of the Jedi we see in the entire game are that.
Yeah.
Like not even the Jedi Council's that.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's how strict and how like impossible the standards are for someone to be like a perfect Jedi Knight, basically. And so everyone basically crumbles in their own way. I was going to ask you about Bastila in particular, because her turn kind of caught me by surprise until I started doing a little bit more thinking and a little bit of research about like, why did this actually happen? It felt like, maybe it would have been fleshed out more if I talked to her more on the ship. I probably didn't talk to her as much as I possibly could have.
Yeah.
But it seemed like you were like, Bastila's on our team. Everything's cool. And then you get to this point, Bastila's evil now, you know?
Yeah. So it's one of those things of like, the more you talk to her and the more you interact with her, you do kind of realize like, oh, she's been struggling a long time and she has not mastered her emotions. I think the idea is like part of her battle meditation is the reason why, like the thing that she can do and that like gives her this strength is the reason why, but more so because she and Revan connected, some of what he was goes into her.
Okay.
Like it's sort of that like she was able to see things clearer because of like connecting through Revan, and because he was fallen to the dark side, she understood and, you know, like, gave into her emotion essentially. Cause there is that romance there too with her.
Yeah. It's the like giving into your emotion or feeling regular human emotions is something that like Jedi are not supposed to do. And it's part of that like unattainable Zen state that very few like Jedi could ever, you know, do basically. There's a side quest with Bastila where you meet her mom and like learn about her family life. And it's another thing, like Jedi are not supposed to have ties to the outside world because those are all, you know, influences that could steer them down the wrong path or something like that. But if you just think about that for a second, like the expectation that you're going to cut off everybody you've ever known and loved in order to join this organization and basically like live as a husk without feeling all the range of human emotions and all of that stuff. Like it hit me by surprise in the moment when Bastila turned, but then like thinking about it, talking about it a little bit, I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense with her too.
She's basically Anakin Skywalker. Like when you look at Bastila, like she's super powerful, like, you know, she's emotional. She didn't cut off her, you know, pre-Jedi relationships. Like she's Anakin Skywalker, basically. The only difference is she comes back or can come back to the light side.
Yeah. If you want her to, she can come back. I also would really recommend anyone listening to this check out Noah Caldwell Gervais' like 2 or 3 hour long video essay, which walks through both KOTOR games along the steps of the hero's journey, because Star Wars media follows the hero's journey super closely, like to the point where Noah points out a couple of points where it's like, if you study the hero's journey, you will know when someone is like purposely following each step to a T. And there's a couple points in this game where it is like that. And Bastila's turn is one of those things. So like, it kind of makes sense because at this point in the hero's journey, someone's got a turn basically, and like an ally becomes an enemy or something like that. So
yeah,
that kind of made sense from a writing perspective. But I do think that the other work, as far as her struggling with being a Jedi, was there too. What I think we touched on it a little bit in the non-spoiler part, but I think we cut something for spoilers. What else is noteworthy about doing a dark side playthrough?
The biggest thing is when you get to Rakata Prime, I think the basically the beach planet before the Starforge.
Yeah.
Where that is where you encounter evil Bastila, you fight her, you can defeat her as a light side user, and she I can't remember if she comes back there or she doesn't come back until the Starforge. I think it might be the Starforge where she returns. But if you're on the dark side, she comes back then. Like, she's all on board, and because you're it's basically the Darth Vader moment, you know, join me and together we will defeat the Emperor. Like, it's that moment, and you're just kind of like, yeah, we're gonna fucking kill Malak and take control of the Starforge. And at that point, Jolie, Juhani, Karth, and Mission all are like, nope, not happening, and they all turn on you. And
do you have to fight them?
You do. One of the things that you can do as well to get even more dark side points, because Zalbar will not fight you. He has sworn a life debt to you, so he won't fight you. He does literally whatever you tell him to do. You can tell him to kill Mission.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, which is the most dark side grim thing that you can do. So you kill Juhani, you kill Jolie, you kill Mission. The two droids, they're on your side no matter what, because, well, one, HK is he's about that action boss. Like, he is all in.
He was Revan's droid. That was one of the clues that you probably everyone probably overlooks, is that HK's like, hey, I like you, but it turns out he was Revan's assassin droid, so that's why he likes
memory. You're regathering his memory as you're going along too, so he didn't remember everything. And then the other one who doesn't talk, you know, again, it's just a droid who's going to do what you say. Yeah. Canderous is that guy who's like, whatever. Like, there are so many, you know, sometimes good people do bad things, sometimes bad people do good things. Like, you're strong, you're powerful. He's a Mandalorian. If you've built up like a good rapport with him, he's in, like, whatever. Like, he's going to follow you forever, because and in conversations with him, you find out he respects Revan. Like, that's one of the things, because Revan was like a hero of the Mandalorian War and was just like a great leader and a great warrior. So Canderous respects him because of that. So he's all in. But yeah, the other characters, they turn on you and you kill them, except for Karth, who runs like a little bitch. Like, you get to a point where you almost kill him and he just bolts and like runs away. And I'm just like, what? That is the most Karth thing to do. If it hasn't been obvious throughout this whole episode, Karth is my least favorite character in this game. He's insufferable. Like, even when you get to know him better, he's still insufferable and a dickhead, and he's just not a great character in my opinion.
I like like we talked about, he's one of the people who's like, hey, this doesn't make sense that the Jedi are just going to welcome you with open arms. Like, I like his role in that, but like,
Yeah.
do I want to spend time talking with him on the ship? No, not really.
No, he's abrasive and just not interesting and like never really tries to be. Like almost every conversation ends with him being like, there, okay, are you happy? You've asked me a lot. Now I'm done. Like he's just like always that guy. And it's just like, oh my God, dude, you're terrible. Thankfully, it's the last time BioWare really had like sort of that secondary main character who's an insufferable piece of shit the whole game.
Thankfully.
Yeah, because like in KOTOR 2, like they don't have anybody like that. And then like after that, like Dragon Age, it's removed. I haven't played a ton of Mass Effect, so I can't. Maybe there is someone there, but like Dragon Age, there's nobody that's like that because the one main secondary character, Alistair, is he's goofy and at least like fun and charming. He's not a complete tool like Karth is.
Yep.
Karth sucks, like terrible character, and I hate that you didn't get to kill him because, like I said, he just bolts, he runs because. I guess he figured, oh, these Sith are way stronger than me with my blaster pistols.
Is the Sith Academy any different if you're like on the dark side? Like, do they treat you differently?
Not really. It's just sort of it's easier because you're killing everybody instead of like trying to figure out how to sabotage things and like work around things. Like you were just being like a true Sith and just burrowing your way through it. I think there's a little bit more interesting conversation with like, you know, Ajunta Paul and like Marco Ragnos and things like that. I think there's a little more interesting because of the dialogue options. So you learn a little bit more about them, but they're a little more tragic in that regard. Like you realize like sort of the folly of being a Sith is they're all going to betray each other and that's why they will never succeed. Yeah. Is like Malik. You guys were winning. You were winning. And because you chose, I'm going to betray Revan right now, you screwed everything up.
Yeah. The Sith will literally like kill each other until there's not enough of them left to exist. And then they just have to like camp out until more people turn to the dark side or some shit. Like
pretty much.
It's a very weird structure that they've got going on.
Yeah, it's a flawed system, but ultimately, like that's what makes Star Wars interesting. Is like technically they're both flawed systems, but
yeah, you
know, people are like, well, the Jedi aren't. And it's like, no, the Jedi are because they become we're perfect. We don't make mistakes.
The Jedi are flawed because it is an unreasonable ask of people to keep up with all the stuff that Jedi have to keep up with. Basically, there's a reason that there's like, you know, so many of the talented young Jedi turn to the dark side at like the drop of a hat because they break one of the 6,000 rules that, you know, puts you on the path.
It's so incredibly hard. And the biggest thing, at least, you know, this is more in the prequel trilogy. The reason why Palpatine was able to rise to power is, and the Jedi didn't even realize this, they completely lost their way. The Force had become clouded. And that's how they had lived. They weren't making their own determinations and own decisions. They were just literally like, whatever the Force wills that we should do. So essentially they're cut off from the Force, not really cut off, but like they can't be guided by it. So because of that, they have no idea what to do. They're like, this thing that's been guiding us for a couple hundred years, fucking, we can't, it's clouded. We don't know what to do. And then a war happens and they're not supposed to be warriors. They're peacekeepers. They're like monks, basically. They're not supposed to be soldiers. And that's why you see like through Clone Wars, like there's a lot of Jedi that fall to the dark side. And the entire time Palpatine's just sitting there like, hey, I'm the Dark Lord of the Sith and you don't know because I'm clouding the Force. I'm
right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Right here the whole time. I am that powerful. So
the dark side is like a tempting and corrupting force too. It's not like, you know, you break one Jedi rule and you're on the dark side, but like the dark side is always there tempting you as well. So, if you're not that perfect, you know, person of iron will that can like resist all of the temptation and all human emotion and all human contact and all, you know, basically what it means to be human in general, then the dark side's probably going to win. So it's
it's incredibly hard.
It's a very hard thing to keep up with.
And one of the cool things that this game does, and you get to see it a lot in like the Valley of the Dark Lords, is you get to understand why the Sith look for things that increase their power, and why they're also constantly looking for things to increase their length of their life and things like that, and why they turn to like Malik is missing a jaw, like his jaw is gone, so he has a mechanical thing attached. And the reason is, and you see this when you go to the Valley of the Dark Lords, they don't live on through the Force. They become like ghosts, and they haunt where they tend to either be attached to a place or an object. So when you go to these tombs, they're literally like a scar in the Force, trapped forever right there in that space. Whereas like other Jedi, when they die, they become part of the Force and they can appear anywhere and everywhere. And we've seen that in like Obi-Wan. We've seen that Yoda does it. Obi-Wan does it. Qui-Gon does it. But the dark side, there's nothing after that. There is no living through the Force. There is, this is the end. So that's why they're all obsessed with power, is because they're trying to figure out, how do I extend my life so I don't become something that is essentially a Force poltergeist?
Right. I guess that makes sense why Anakin's there at the end of Return of the Jedi, because he made the trip back to the light side right before he died. Yeah.
Yep. Funny how that works.
Yeah.
It's like you could be terrible for like 30 years and then you just come back in the last 2 minutes and you're back, baby.
Yep, back
and
into
you're not
heaven.
all fucked up either.
I'm still mad they replaced him with Hayden Christensen, but no shade to Hayden Christensen. He did what he could.
He did. Hey, he's sometimes you can't escape bad writing.
Okay, so from bad writing to bad boss fights, you get to the Starforge. You go through this just incredibly long gauntlet of combat, going through like the catwalks and stuff inside the Starforge. You get separated from your party. It's a whole thing. It is an extremely long section. It's too long, but I guess they want to make sure that you are up to the task of fighting Malik at the end. Because even on a dark side playthrough, you're still going to fight Malik, right?
Oh yeah, that doesn't change. Some of the details of the fight change,
right?
Because of certain force abilities that you would have as a dark side user that you wouldn't have as like a light side user,
right?
I think it's so long, and I think the Starforge is like this. One, because they're like, that's the power of the Starforge, is it can create droids and ships and blah blah blah, like with no resources, like out of thin air. And I think it's literally just if you haven't leveled up enough, it's going to level you up to be relevant to that point of the game.
Yep. So in the Malik fight, Malik has these 7 Jedi kind of captured in these stasis pods or whatever. And when you fight him, you beat him one time. He runs over and steals the power from the Jedi that are captured. And there's a couple ways to go about the fight. So if you're doing a dark side playthrough, is it force lightning or force drain or something like that?
You do force drain and take their life force.
Right. So he can't steal the life force from them. And you're dark side, so who gives a shit? You're killing Jedi.
You're out dark siding him, showing you're the Dark Lord of the Sith, not him.
Exactly. If you're doing a light side playthrough, that's very unfortunate, because what that means is you just have to fight Malik 8 times.
Pretty much. That's the only time where this game with light side is harder, no doubt, because you get less money. You have to go essentially the long way about everything. So it is essentially more rewarding, but it's also more difficult because of that.
Yeah. And this final boss fight it's not difficult. It wasn't for me. Not a difficult fight. Like strategically, you are a superhero at this point. Even if you're on the light side and you don't have the cool dark side powers, you're still a superhero. I just had like enough healing items, so if Malik hit me a bunch, I healed. But what it amounts to, because he comes over and you beat him, he runs over, you can't hit him when he's running.
Yeah, which is like, such a fucking video game bullshit thing.
And so what happens is he runs over, he steals the life from the Jedi, he fully heals, and then you repeat
beat
that
his ass again.
Yeah, repeat that 7 times, and then it's over. It's really not that the combat was ever great in the game, but this is a real stinker of a final boss fight.
It is, and I sort of get it because of the way combat's laid out. So like, I get it in that regard. But as you said, man, it's just not fun. It is a little better dark side wise because you can do it. You can drain them, and so it makes it easier in that capacity. And it's the only time that like being dark side really feels like, okay, yeah, this is great because you're really having a huge impact on something in the game that feels like it makes a difference. And then when you beat Malik, you're just basically the Emperor again. Like, you become the Emperor of the Sith Empire, essentially.
Yeah. Like, I was in this fight because I had a lot of time to think in between the 5th and 6th time I fought him during this fight. I'm playing a light side character. Why can't I save these captive Jedi? But there's no way to save them. Cool,
right?
Yeah, it would have been awesome to, I don't know, do some fucking unplug the machine or something so they can get up and run away. But
yeah, like, get out of here. Yeah. Save yourself. For like, I don't know if the game is still going to be remade. I know at one point it was in being remade and then it's not anymore. But
yeah,
maybe that's a change. If it actually does go along with getting remade finally, maybe that's what happens, is they add that element in. And I could see that in a remake scenario of like, because at the time it's 2003, it's the original Xbox. Like, there's only so much you can do. But I feel like now they would probably add that in to let you like free them and let them get out of there or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was being remade, and then they transferred it to a different studio because they weren't happy with how the original studio was doing it or something like that. So it's probably in development hell at this point.
Yeah, I think it's almost safe to say it's not happening, but it's not like officially been said that it's not happening.
Right. But if a remake were to happen, combat would be like easily the biggest jump in quality. I feel pretty confident in saying like they'll make the combat better. And then by extension, this final boss fight will surely be better, maybe more options with how to solve it than just literally fight Malik 8 times in a row.
Yeah, that felt like we know we've got to do an epic fight, but because ultimately like combat and the enemies that you face are so limited into what they can do, this is the only thing that we could do to make it different than every other dark side Force user fight you've had the whole game.
Yep.
I guess there's only so many ways that you can do it. Granted, if it was done today, there's going to be some quick time events involved and like mashing the X button really quickly. And
yeah. So I believe if you're doing a light side playthrough, you get a dialogue choice to basically say like, I'll join the Jedi, or basically say like, you know what, I'm leaving, peace, deuces, and then you walk off. But in my game, I can't remember what I said, but there is like, like at the end of Return of the Jedi, the ceremony with the medals and all of that stuff. So it's kind of fun. Good throwback.
Yeah, it's a nice, like, kind of very warm, fuzzy Star Wars ending.
Yeah.
I think the dark side, it's literally like, Bastila introduces you as like the Darth Revan, the Emperor, Dark Lord of the Sith, or whatever the hell she calls you. And it's just like in front of this massive army of Sith. And it's like, we're going to destroy the Republic and rule the galaxy. And it's like, well, that doesn't happen. But
yeah,
which is, I get it. Plus, they were working on KOTOR 2 at this point, which is funny because when they were working on it's a different studio that makes KOTOR 2.
Obsidian, yeah.
And they didn't know the story of the first game.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why, like, when you play it, there's some connections, but not really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as I remember, like, HK-47 is in KOTOR 2. But like,
you can rebuild him, yes.
Yeah, most of the other characters aren't there. The story takes place like 5 years later, but it's not about Revan at all.
You're the exile.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. I'm I have KOTOR 2 on the Switch now. I'll probably play it sometime because I had a good enough time playing this that I'd be interested in, because I always remembered the story in this game, because how could you forget? But I don't remember the story of KOTOR 2 very well, so I would be interested to go back, because I remember loving it back when I played it the first time.
It's great. I think between the two, like, they're both good, and the cool thing about them is that both of them have things about them that are way better than the other one. Like one of this is sort of a spoiler, but not really, because you can do like quests and stuff with all your individual characters.
Mhm.
But in the second KOTOR, you can make every single person on your party a Jedi. Like they aren't one, but then they can become one.
I remember
like,
that. Yeah.
Which is awesome. Like that's so cool. It's hard with some of them. Like it's really hard to get that closeness and dialogue and all that kind of stuff. But to me, I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like this is what you want, is like to make everybody a Jedi. And you know, I think its secondary character stories are a little bit deeper because almost everybody has this sort of like inherent sadness about their character. So I think that's kind of cool. The force powers are cool. It's great. It's a really good game.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you should definitely jump into it. The ending of it sucks because it almost feels like it wasn't finished. Like that's the problem with the ending of the second one.
KOTOR 2 does notably have like cut content that Asper, the developer of like this remastered version on Switch and stuff, promised that they were going to put out like as a DLC, and then recently they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. So what they did was they said like, if you own KOTOR 2, please send us proof and we'll send you a game code for another one of the old Star Wars games. So I did that. I got Jedi Outcast on the Switch. So I never played that. That'll be cool.
It's fun. It's one of the ones like where, you know, you just kind of pick your force powers and play through the game. You get to a point where you could choose light side or dark side, but you could be using dark side powers the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Like I had a good time with it when I played it originally.
Hell yeah. And I've had a good time on this episode here tonight, man. This is a lot of fun.
Me too.
I appreciate you. We're over 2 hours now. Again, taking the time to come talk KOTOR with me.
Yeah, man. I was so pumped when you asked me to do it. This is one of my favorite. It's Star Wars. Like my life is Star Wars. Like I have multiple Star Wars tattoos. I literally do not remember a point in my life where Star Wars was not part of it.
Yeah,
so
same.
You know, love it so much. I love this game. It's like I said, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's a must play. Just to appreciate it, and especially nowadays, looking at how, you know, Star Wars fans, we're eating good. You know, we got so many TV shows and animated shows and movies, and like this was in the break of the drought, you know, after Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So, but it is still like, there's so much cool stuff that you can see in Star Wars media today. There's just like hints and pieces of it, especially if Dave Filoni's involved, because he's like gonna take that, gonna just add that in.
Yeah, this is good. It's always good to have a Star Wars story that does not involve the Skywalkers. You know, there is potential for endless storytelling out there. So this is awesome, and also good to have a Star Wars story again that's taking place in a much different time zone, like era in Star Wars history. Because again, you can tell all these wild stories with Sith Lords, and you don't have to worry about like, well, Darth Vader has to win because he's in all the movies. So yeah. So and this game and this series gave birth to the Old Republic, which is sneakily the best MMO that is out there right now. Nice.
And it's also kind of not an MMO because it's basically Knights of the Old Republic 3. It's just online. That's it. Like you could play the whole game solo. You don't ever have to play with anybody.
Nice. That
and it's free to play.
The best MMO, even better than the critically acclaimed MMO.
Well, not the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV, where you can play the free trial up to level 60,
That's
including
right.
the award-winning Heavensward for no limits on playtime. I love that meme.
Fantastic. Thanks again, man. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Everybody listening, I appreciate everyone sticking it out to the end. As always, if you have not played KOTOR before and we just spoiled the whole thing, I do think that there is value in going back and seeing the breadcrumbs that they laid for that big twist and all of the stuff with the Jedi too. Thank you for listening. Once again, check down in the show notes for links to everything that Mick is doing. Highly recommended. And tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.